The abandoned Riverside shopping center had been closed for 3 years when maintenance worker Carlos Ramirez found the hidden door behind a false wall in the basement storage area. The mall, once Bew. Carlos had been hired by the demolition company to clear out remaining fixtures before the building's scheduled destruction in August 2025. The discovery came accidentally. While removing old display cases, Carlos noticed his crowbar had punched through what should have been solid concrete. Behind the thin drywall partition, he found a small room that didn't appear on any building plans. The space contained a sleeping bag, empty food containers, and most disturbing of all, a driver's license belonging to Jessica Marie Thompson, reported missing from this very mall in December 1999. Jessica had been 18 when she vanished during her Christmas shopping trip. The case had consumed the local police department for months. Detective Sarah Chen, now approaching retirement, had been a rookie officer when Jessica disappeared. She remembered the case clearly, how Jessica's car remained in the parking lot, how security footage showed her entering the mall but never leaving, how her family never stopped believing she was alive somewhere. Carlos immediately called the police. Within an hour, the mall swarmed with investigators, crime scene technicians, and Detective Chen, who had requested to personally handle any developments in the Thompson case. The hidden room measured roughly 8 by 10 feet. It had been carefully constructed with soundproofing materials and a ventilation system that connected to the mall's main air ducts. This wasn't random, Detective Chen told the responding officers as she examined the space. Someone with knowledge of the building's layout and access to construction materials built this. They planned this carefully. The room contained several items that would prove crucial to solving Jessica's disappearance. A journal with entries dated from December 1999 to March 2000, photographs of Jessica in the room, and a set of master keys for the entire mall complex. The journal entries, written in Jessica's handwriting, described her captivity in chilling detail. The first entry, dated December 15, 1999, began, "Someone is keeping me here. I can hear people walking above me during the day. I scream but nobody hears me." The final entry, dated March 8, 2000, was incomplete. "He says he's moving me today. I'm scared of what that means. If someone finds this, tell my parents I love them and I never stopped trying to get home." Detective Chen carefully documented everything in the room. Among the evidence, she found receipts from the mall's food court, all dated between December 1999 and March 2000. The receipts were signed with an employee authorization code that could be traced back to specific workers. One name appeared consistently: Michael Stevens, who had worked as a security supervisor at the mall during that period. The photographs showed Jessica in various states of distress, clearly taken against her will. Some images showed her attempting to scratch messages into the walls of her prison. Crime scene technicians found these scratches, barely visible under layers of paint that had been applied over them. Using enhanced lighting techniques, they uncovered Jessica's desperate messages. "Help me. Mom, I love you." And most importantly, "Mike did this." As news of the discovery spread, Jessica's parents, Robert and Linda Thompson, rushed to the scene. They had never given up hope that their daughter was alive, but the evidence suggested otherwise. "We always knew something terrible happened here," Linda Thompson told reporters who had gathered outside the mall. Jessica would never have just left. She was planning to start college in January. She had her whole life ahead of her. Detective Chen began reviewing the original case files that evening. In 1999, Michael Stevens had been interviewed as part of the routine questioning of all mall employees. His statement indicated he had seen Jessica enter the electronics store around 7:30 p.m. on December 14th, but claimed he lost track of her in the evening crowd. Stevens had portrayed himself as helpful and concerned, even volunteering to work extra shifts to help search for Jessica within the mall's premises. The original investigation had focused primarily on external threats, potential abductors who might have followed Jessica to the mall or approached her in the parking lot. The possibility that someone with legitimate access to the building had been involved had been considered but not thoroughly investigated. Stevens had passed a polygraph test, though Detective Chen noted that polygraphs were not always reliable, especially with practiced liars. Stevens no longer lived in Ohio. According to employment records, he had moved to Arizona in April 2000, just weeks after Jessica's journal entries ended. He had worked various security jobs since leaving the mall, maintaining a clean criminal record that had never raised suspicions. Detective Chen immediately contacted Arizona authorities to locate Stevens, knowing that after 25 years, tracking him down would require careful police work. The demolition of the mall was postponed indefinitely. The entire building was now a crime scene, and investigators needed time to search for additional evidence. Chen suspected that if Stevens had been capable of constructing such an elaborate hidden room, there might be other concealed areas or evidence scattered throughout the massive structure. The race to uncover the truth had begun. The security supervisor, Detective Chen, spent the morning of August 15, 2025, reviewing Michael Stevens' personnel file from Riverside Shopping Center. Stevens had been 32 years old when he started working at the mall in September 1999, just 3 months before Jessica's disappearance. His application showed previous security experience at various retail locations across Ohio, with consistently positive references that painted him as reliable and trustworthy. The file contained performance evaluations that described Stevens as dedicated, thorough, and willing to work extra hours when needed. His supervisor in 1999, Frank Morrison, had retired years ago but agreed to meet with Detective Chen at the police station. Morrison, now 71, remembered Stevens clearly. "Mike was one of my best workers," Morrison told Chen during their interview. "He knew every inch of that mall, every storage room, every maintenance access point. He volunteered for the overnight shifts that other guards didn't want. Said he preferred working when it was quiet." Morrison paused, his expression growing troubled. "When that girl went missing, Mike was the one who suggested we search the basement areas. He said he knew places someone might hide that weren't on the official floor plans." Chen showed Morrison the photographs from the hidden room. Morrison's face paled as he studied the images. "I remember him doing some kind of work down there. Said he was organizing old Christmas decorations and cleaning supplies. I never questioned it because Mike always took initiative on projects like that. He had keys to everything. Came with the supervisor position." The detective learned that Stevens had specifically requested the December schedule that included both evening and overnight shifts during the weeks surrounding Jessica's disappearance. His time card showed he had worked the evening of December 14th, when Jessica vanished, and had volunteered for additional overnight shifts throughout the following weeks, when other employees called in sick for the holidays. "Did Stevens seem different after Jessica disappeared?" Chen asked Morrison. The retired supervisor considered the question carefully. He was very involved in the search efforts, maybe too involved looking back. He kept suggesting new areas to check, places that seemed random at the time. He also asked a lot of questions about what the police were doing, what evidence they had found. Chen drove to the mall to examine Stevens' former office space. The security office had been cleaned out years ago, but building records showed it was located directly above the hidden room where Jessica had been held. A ventilation grate in the floor would have allowed Stevens to monitor his prisoner without entering the concealed space. Crime scene technicians found scratches around the grate that suggested it had been frequently removed and replaced. The mall's archived security footage from 1999 had been stored in a climate-controlled warehouse. Chen spent hours reviewing tapes from December 14th and the following days. The footage showed Stevens' movements throughout the mall during his shifts. On the night Jessica disappeared, cameras captured him making his normal rounds until approximately 8 p.m., when he disappeared from view for nearly 2 hours. His explanation at the time had been that he was conducting a thorough check of the basement storage areas. More disturbing was footage from the days following Jessica's disappearance. Stevens appeared repeatedly in areas near the hidden room, often carrying bags or containers that he claimed contained cleaning supplies or maintenance equipment. He was seen using service elevators and employee-only corridors that would have allowed him to transport food and other necessities to his prisoner without being observed by other mall employees or customers. Chen contacted Detective Ray Williams in Phoenix, Arizona, where Stevens currently worked as a night security guard at a corporate office complex. Williams agreed to maintain surveillance while Chen prepared to travel to Arizona with an arrest warrant. "We'll watch him carefully," Williams assured her. "If this guy has been getting away with kidnapping and murder for 25 years, we can't risk letting him disappear." The detective also reached out to Jessica's college roommate, Amy Foster, who had been expecting Jessica to move into their shared dormitory in January 2000. Amy, now 43 and working as a teacher in Cleveland, remembered Jessica as excited about starting college and nervous about leaving her family for the first time. "Jessica called me the week before she disappeared," Amy told Chen over the phone. "She was Christmas shopping for gifts to give everyone before she left for school. She mentioned feeling like someone had been watching her at the mall, but she thought she was just being paranoid because she was nervous about college." That afternoon, Chen received a call from the crime lab. DNA evidence from items in the hidden room had been processed, confirming that Jessica had been held there for an extended period. More significantly, they had found DNA from a second individual, male DNA that matched samples from several unsolved missing person cases in Ohio and neighboring states during the late 1990s and early 2000s. "We may be looking at a serial offender," the lab technician explained. "The DNA profile matches evidence from at least 3 other cases involving young women who disappeared from shopping centers in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia between 1997 and 2002. Chen realized that Stevens' move to Arizona in April 2000 might not have been the end of his criminal activity. She contacted law enforcement agencies in Arizona to check for similar disappearances that might be connected to Stevens' employment history. The pattern that emerged was disturbing. In each city where Stevens had worked security, young women had vanished under circumstances similar to Jessica's case. The Arizona Connection. On August 18, 2025, Detective Chen flew to Phoenix to coordinate with local authorities in apprehending Michael Stevens. Detective Williams met her at the airport with a comprehensive file on Stevens's 25 years in Arizona. The information painted a picture of a man who had successfully reinvented himself while potentially continuing his criminal activities. Stevens currently lived in a modest apartment complex in Tempe and worked the night shift at Pinnacle Corporate Center. His landlord, Maria Gonzalez, described him as quiet and reliable, always paying rent on time and keeping to himself. "He worked nights, so we rarely saw him during normal hours," Gonzalez told the detectives. "Very polite when we did interact, but he never socialized with other tenants." Williams had been investigating 2 unsolved missing person cases that occurred shortly after Stevens moved to Arizona. In June 2000, 19-year-old Rebecca Martinez disappeared from Paradise Valley Mall, where she worked at a clothing store. In September 2001, 21-year-old Amanda Clark vanished from Desert Ridge Marketplace after her evening shift at a jewelry kiosk. Both women had been young, brunette, and approximately Jessica's age when she disappeared. "The pattern is too similar to ignore," Williams explained as they drove to Stevens' workplace. Both victims were last seen at shopping centers. Both disappeared during evening hours, and in both cases, security footage showed them entering the buildings but never leaving. The investigations went cold because there was no obvious connection to anyone with access to the buildings. Stevens had worked security at Paradise Valley Mall from April 2000 to November 2001, covering both periods when Rebecca and Amanda disappeared. After Amanda's vanishing, Stevens had abruptly quit his job and moved to a different security company across town. His employment pattern showed a tendency to leave positions shortly after unexplained incidents or increased police attention. The detectives established surveillance outside Stevens' apartment building. They observed his routine over 2 days. Stevens left for work each evening at 10 p.m., drove directly to the corporate center, and returned home each morning at 7 a.m. He made weekly trips to a grocery store and occasional visits to a storage facility on the outskirts of Phoenix. Chen obtained a warrant to search the storage facility. Unit B47, rented under Stevens' name, contained disturbing evidence of his long-term criminal activity. The space held boxes of photographs, jewelry, clothing items, and personal belongings that appeared to have been taken from multiple victims. Many items matched descriptions from missing person reports spanning from 1997 to 2024. Among the evidence, Chen found a jewelry box that matched the description of one belonging to Rebecca Martinez. Rebecca's mother had provided detailed descriptions of her daughter's favorite pieces, including a distinctive silver bracelet with turquoise stones that her grandmother had given her. The bracelet was in Stephen's storage unit, along with Rebecca's driver's license and credit cards. More shocking was the discovery of recent photographs dated 2023 and 2024, showing young women who appeared to be held against their will in what looked like another concealed room. The backgrounds in these photos were different from Jessica's prison, suggesting Stevens had constructed multiple hiding places over the years. The most recent photo was dated July 2025, just weeks before Jessica's room had been discovered. "He's still active," Chen told Williams, as they documented the storage unit contents. "These recent photos mean there might be someone alive right now, being held somewhere." They immediately expanded their search to include current missing person reports in the Phoenix area. Detective Williams contacted the families of Rebecca Martinez and Amanda Clark to inform them of the potential breakthrough in their cases. Rebecca's mother, Elena Martinez, broke down when shown the photograph of her daughter's bracelet. "I knew she didn't just run away," Elena said through tears. "Rebecca was planning her wedding. She was happy. She would never have left without telling us." At Chin, the detectives also found a detailed journal kept by Stevens, documenting his methods and victim selection process. The entries revealed a calculated predator who specifically targeted young women working evening shifts at shopping centers. Stevens had studied security systems, employee schedules, and building layouts to identify vulnerable targets and escape routes. One entry from March 2000 described Jessica's final days. Subject became too difficult to manage. Transportation to secondary location completed successfully. Cleanup of primary site thorough, no traces remain. The clinical language suggested Stevens viewed his victims as objects rather than human beings. Chen realized that secondary location likely meant Stevens had moved Jessica from the mall to another location before killing her. The journal contained references to several secondary sites in both Ohio and Arizona, suggesting there might be multiple burial locations that had never been discovered. As the investigation expanded, Chen coordinated with FBI agents who specialized in serial crimes. The evidence from Stevens's storage unit was being processed rapidly to identify additional victims and potential current captives. Time was critical. If Stevens was still holding someone prisoner, every hour of delay could mean the difference between life and death. The arrest was scheduled for the following morning when Stevens would be leaving work. Chen wanted to take him by surprise, before he had any opportunity to destroy evidence or harm potential victims. 25 years after Jessica Thompson had walked into Riverside Shopping Center for the last time, her killer was finally within reach of justice. The arrest and confession. At 6:47 a.m. on August 20, 2025, Detective Chen and Detective Williams, backed by FBI agents and Phoenix police officers, surrounded Michael Stevens as he walked to his car after finishing his overnight shift. Stevens, now 57 years old, showed no surprise when confronted with the arrest warrant. His calm demeanor suggested he had been expecting this moment. "Michael Stevens, you're under arrest for the kidnapping and murder of Jessica Thompson," Chen announced, reading him his rights. Stevens remained silent during the arrest, but his eyes showed recognition when Chen mentioned Jessica's name. He offered no resistance as officers searched his vehicle and found a detailed map of Phoenix, with several locations marked in red ink. During the drive to the police station, Stevens asked only one question: "How did you find the room?" When Chen explained about the demolition workers' discovery, Stevens nodded slowly. "I figured that building would come down eventually," he said. "I should have moved everything years ago." The interrogation began at 9 a.m. with Chen, Williams, and FBI agent Sarah Martinez present. Stevens had declined to request an attorney, saying he was tired of running from this. His confession unfolded over the next 6 hours, revealing details that had haunted investigators for 25 years. "I saw Jessica shopping alone that evening," Stevens began. "She was pretty, young, vulnerable. I followed her for about an hour, learning her patterns, watching how she moved through the store. When she went to the restroom near the food court, I knew it was my opportunity." Stevens described how he had approached Jessica as she left the restroom, identifying himself as mall security and claiming there had been reports of suspicious activity near her car. He offered to escort her safely to the parking lot, using his position of authority to gain her trust. Instead of leading her outside, he had guided her toward a service elevator that connected to the basement levels. She started to realize something was wrong when we went down instead of toward the exits, Stevens continued. But by then it was too late. I had her in the basement, and nobody goes down there after hours except maintenance staff. The hidden room had taken Stevens 3 weeks to construct in October and November 1999. He had used his security access to work on the project during overnight shifts, carefully soundproofing the space and installing a ventilation system. He had studied the building's layout extensively, choosing a location that was isolated from regular foot traffic but accessible through service corridors. Stevens kept Jessica alive for nearly 3 months, visiting her daily to provide food and water. I told myself I was going to let her go eventually, he said. But she knew too much about me, about the room. She had seen my face, knew my name. I couldn't risk letting her identify me. The detective pressed for details about Jessica's death. Stevens described how Jessica had become increasingly desperate and uncooperative as weeks passed. She had attempted to escape several times, once nearly succeeding in overpowering him when he entered the room with food. Her final journal entry had been accurate. Stevens had indeed moved her from the mall to a secondary location. I took her to a cabin I was renting in the mountains outside Columbus, Stevens admitted. It was March 8, 2000. She fought me the entire way. I had to drug her to keep her quiet during transport. Fracture. At the cabin, Stevens had killed Jessica and buried her body in a remote location he had prepared weeks in advance. Stevens provided detailed directions to Jessica's burial site, a wooded area approximately 40 miles northeast of Columbus, marked by a distinctive rock formation that he had used as a landmark. He had returned to the site several times over the years to ensure the grave remained undisturbed. The confession continued with details about Rebecca Martinez and Amanda Clark in Phoenix. Stevens admitted to using similar methods, approaching his victims while working security, exploiting their trust in his authority, and imprisoning them in hidden locations he had constructed at various shopping centers where he worked. Rebecca lasted 6 weeks, Stevens said matter-of-factly. Amanda only 3 weeks. She was more aggressive, kept trying to attack me. I moved them both to a house I was renting in Scottsdale before. He trailed off, but investigators understood the implication. Agent Martinez showed Stevens the recent photographs found in his storage unit. "Who are these women?" she demanded. Stevens studied the images before answering. "The older photos are from cases you probably haven't connected to me yet, but these recent ones," he pointed to several photos dated 2024 and 2025. "There's someone you need to find quickly." Stevens revealed he had been holding 22-year-old Lisa Chen, a graduate student who had disappeared from Scottsdale Fashion Square in May 2025. Lisa was being held in another concealed room Stevens had built in an abandoned warehouse in eastern Phoenix. Unlike his previous victims, Lisa was still alive, though Stevens admitted he had been planning to move her to a permanent location within days. "She's in warehouse unit C18 at the old Morrison Industrial Complex," Stevens told investigators. "I've been bringing her food twice a week. She was supposed to be moved this weekend." FBI agents immediately dispatched rescue teams to the warehouse location while continuing Stevens' interrogation. The confession revealed a 28-year pattern of kidnapping, imprisonment, and murder spanning multiple states. Stevens admitted to killing at least 12 young women, with evidence suggesting there might be additional victims investigators had not yet identified. As Stevens provided details about burial locations across Ohio, Arizona, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, Detective Chen felt a mixture of satisfaction and horror. Jessica Thompson's case was finally solved, but the scope of Stevens's crimes was far greater than anyone had imagined. The discovery of that hidden room in a condemned mall had opened a door to one of the most extensive serial killer investigations in recent history. The rescue of Lisa Chen. At 2:17 p.m. on August 20, 2025, FBI rescue teams surrounded the Morrison Industrial Complex in eastern Phoenix. Stevens had provided detailed instructions about accessing the hidden room where Lisa Chen was being held. Enter through the loading dock of Warehouse C-18. Locate a false wall behind stacked shipping pallets and remove a section of drywall that concealed a steel door. Agent Martinez coordinated the rescue operation, while Detective Chen continued Stevens' interrogation via phone from the police station. Stevens insisted that Lisa would be alive, but warned that she would be severely traumatized and possibly violent toward rescuers. "She attacks anyone who comes near her now," he explained. "I had to start restraining her after she tried to blind me with a piece of broken plastic." The warehouse had been abandoned for 3 years, making it an ideal location for Stevens's purposes. The building's size and maze-like interior provided multiple escape routes and concealed areas where criminal activity could occur undetected. Stevens had rented the space under a false name, paying cash 6 months in advance to avoid scrutiny from the property management company. FBI agents approached the hidden room cautiously, calling out Lisa's name and identifying themselves as law enforcement. Initial attempts to communicate through the steel door were met with silence. When agents finally breached the entrance, they found Lisa Chen huddled in the corner of a 10 by 12-foot room, severely malnourished and showing signs of prolonged captivity. Lisa was conscious but initially unresponsive to rescue attempts. Paramedics who entered the room found evidence that she had been chained to prevent escape attempts. Marks on her wrists and ankles indicated prolonged restraint. The room contained minimal amenities: a sleeping bag, water containers, and packages of non-perishable food that Stevens had been bringing twice weekly. "Lisa, you're safe now," Agent Martinez told her as paramedics prepared her for transport to Phoenix General Hospital. "The man who took you is in custody. Your parents are on their way here." Lisa's first words were barely audible. "How long have I been here?" When told it was August 20th, she began crying, realizing she had been captive for nearly 4 months. Dr. Emily Rodriguez, the emergency physician who treated Lisa, described her condition as consistent with prolonged psychological and physical trauma. "She's severely dehydrated and undernourished, but she's alive and her vital signs are stable," Dr. Rodriguez told reporters. "The psychological trauma will take much longer to heal, but she's remarkably strong to have survived this ordeal." Saiwo, Lisa's parents, David and Susan Chen, had flown from Seattle the moment they received word of their daughter's rescue. Lisa was pursuing a master's degree in environmental science at Arizona State University when she disappeared from the Scottsdale Fashion Square Mall on May 15, 2025. She had been shopping for a gift for her mother's birthday when Stevens approached her. During her medical examination, Lisa was able to provide investigators with crucial details about her captivity. Stevens had told her about previous victims, apparently using their stories to terrorize her into compliance. "He said there had been others before me," Lisa told Detective Williams. "He showed me photographs of women he claimed had tried to escape and what happened to them." Lisa's testimony corroborated many details from Stevens' confession. She confirmed that he visited the warehouse location twice weekly, always wearing a security guard uniform and claiming to work for the property management company. Stevens had constructed the hidden room with the same attention to detail he had used in previous cases: soundproofing, ventilation, and multiple layers of concealment. The rescue generated national media attention, with news outlets covering the story of Lisa's survival and the discovery of Stevens' decades-long criminal career. Lisa's professor, Dr. James Patterson, organized a support fund for her medical expenses and recovery needs. "Lisa is one of our brightest students," Patterson told reporters. "Her determination to survive this ordeal shows the same strength she brings to her academic work." Stevens, when informed of Lisa's rescue, showed no emotion but provided additional details that helped investigators understand his methods. "I was planning to move her to the permanent site this weekend," he repeated. "She was becoming too difficult to manage, and I was worried about the noise she was making when property managers came around for inspections." The permanent site Stevens referenced was revealed to be his euphemism for murder and burial. Investigators realized that Lisa's rescue had occurred just days before Stevens planned to kill her. The timing of the mall demolition and discovery of Jessica's room had literally saved Lisa's life. FBI profilers studying Stevens' case noted the evolution of his methods over 28 years. While his early victims like Jessica had been held for months, his later victims were typically killed within weeks. Lisa's 4-month survival was unusual, and suggested that Stevens had been uncertain about his next move, possibly influenced by increased security at potential burial sites. As Lisa began her recovery, investigators prepared to use her testimony alongside Stevens' confession to build comprehensive cases for multiple murders across several states. Her survival provided not only hope for her family, but crucial evidence that would ensure Stevens faced justice for his crimes against victims who had not been as fortunate. Excavating the past. On August 23, 2025, excavation teams began the grim task of recovering Jessica Thompson's remains from the burial site Michael Stevens had described in the mountains northeast of Columbus. The location, marked by distinctive limestone outcroppings, had remained undisturbed for 25 years. Stevens had chosen the site carefully, ensuring it was remote enough to avoid accidental discovery, while remaining accessible for his periodic visits to confirm the grave's security. Detective Chen accompanied the forensic team, along with Jessica's parents Robert and Linda Thompson. The Thompsons had insisted on being present when their daughter was finally brought home, despite the emotional difficulty of the moment. "We've waited 25 years to know what happened to Jessica," Linda said. "We need to be here when she's found." The excavation required careful archaeological techniques to preserve any evidence that might remain after 2.5 decades underground. Dr. Michael Foster, the forensic anthropologist leading the recovery, explained that even after such an extended period, significant evidence could survive to confirm the circumstances of Jessica's death and provide closure for her family. Stevens had buried Jessica approximately 4 feet underground in a crude wooden box he had constructed specifically for that purpose. The burial showed signs of advanced planning. Stevens had dug the grave weeks before moving Jessica from the mall to his rented cabin. Tree growth patterns around the site indicated the area had been disturbed in early 2000, supporting Stevens's timeline. When forensic teams uncovered the makeshift coffin, they found Jessica's remains along with clothing and personal items that matched descriptions provided by her family. Most significantly, they recovered the silver necklace Jessica had been wearing when she disappeared, a graduation gift from her parents that had been mentioned prominently in missing person reports. Dr. Foster's preliminary examination of Jessica's remains confirmed details from Stevens' confession. Evidence indicated Jessica had suffered blunt force trauma to her skull, consistent with Stevens' admission that she had fought against him during her final hours at the mountain cabin. The physical evidence supported his claim that her death had occurred in March 2000, approximately 3 months after her initial disappearance. Simultaneously, FBI teams in Arizona were excavating burial sites Stevens had revealed during extended interrogations. The locations included remote desert areas outside Phoenix, Tucson, and Flagstaff, where Stevens had disposed of victims over his years in Arizona. Each site required careful coordination with local authorities and specialized desert recovery techniques. The excavation near Scottsdale revealed the remains of Rebecca Martinez, the 19-year-old who had disappeared from Paradise Valley Mall in June 2000. Rebecca's body had been buried in a shallow grave marked by a distinctive cactus formation that Stevens had used as a landmark. Personal items found with Rebecca's remains included her grandmother's turquoise bracelet, confirming the connection to evidence found in Stevens's storage unit. Amanda Clark's remains were recovered from a site in the Sonoran Desert south of Phoenix. Amanda had been buried with her work uniform from the jewelry kiosk where she had been employed when she disappeared in September 2001. The preservation of fabric and personal items in the dry desert climate provided investigators with physical evidence linking Stevens to Amanda's murder. Stevens continued to provide information about additional burial sites during his ongoing interrogation. FBI agent Martinez noted that Stevens seemed almost relieved to be revealing the locations of his victims, as if he had been carrying the burden of their concealment for decades. He's been very specific about each site, Martinez told Detective Chen. He remembers exact details about the terrain, landmarks, and how he concealed each grave. The scope of Stevens' crimes expanded as teams excavated sites in Pennsylvania and West Virginia connected to his employment history in the late 1990s. In each location, Stevens had worked security positions at shopping centers where young women had disappeared under suspicious circumstances. The pattern was consistent across multiple states and time periods. Dr. Patricia Williams, a forensic psychologist consulting on the case, analyzed Stevens' methodical approach to victim disposal. He treated each burial like a project, Dr. Williams explained. The consistency of his methods, the careful selection of sites, the use of landmarks for future reference. This shows a highly organized offender who planned every aspect of his crimes. The excavation work was emotionally devastating for victim families, but also provided the closure they had sought for years. Elena Martinez, Rebecca's mother, held her daughter's recovered jewelry and wept. "At least now we know what happened to her," Elena said. "Rebecca can finally come home and be properly buried with her family." As recovery efforts continued across 4 states, investigators realized they were dealing with one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. Stevens had successfully concealed his crimes for nearly 3 decades by constantly moving between states, carefully selecting isolated victims, and using his security positions to avoid suspicion while gaining access to potential targets. The discovery of Jessica's hidden room at the abandoned mall had opened a door to solving dozens of missing person cases that had remained cold for decades. Families who had never stopped hoping for answers finally had the truth, even though that truth brought its own painful revelations about the final days of their loved ones. The network revealed, during his 4th day of interrogation on August 24, 2025, Michael Stevens made a revelation that stunned investigators. His decades-long crime spree had not been conducted entirely alone. Stevens admitted to having contact with other individuals who shared his interests and had provided assistance in various aspects of his criminal activities. "There are others who understand what I was doing," Stevens told FBI agent Martinez and Detective Chen. "We communicated through secure channels, shared information about techniques, locations, and opportunities. I wasn't operating in complete isolation." Stevens revealed the existence of an online network of predators who had been active since the early days of Internet communication. The group used encrypted messaging systems and private forums to exchange information about targeting victims, constructing concealment areas, and avoiding law enforcement detection. Stevens had been a member of this network since 1998, shortly before Jessica Thompson's disappearance. FBI cybercrime specialists immediately began tracing the digital connections Stevens described. The investigation revealed a sophisticated network spanning multiple states and potentially international boundaries. Members of the group used code names and advanced encryption to communicate, making detection extremely difficult for law enforcement agencies. Stevens provided investigators with usernames, website addresses, and communication methods used by the network. His cooperation was motivated partly by a desire for reduced sentencing, but primarily by what investigators described as genuine remorse for the scope of his crimes. "He seems to understand that his actions caused tremendous suffering," Agent Martinez observed, "but he also appears relieved to finally reveal the full extent of his activities." The network, which called itself the Collectors, had been active for over 25 years. Members shared detailed information about potential victims, construction techniques for hidden rooms and burial sites, and methods for avoiding detection by authorities. Stevens had been one of the most active participants, contributing information based on his security industry experience. Computer forensics teams working with the FBI recovered thousands of communications between network members. The messages revealed coordination of criminal activities across state lines and potential international connections. Several members appeared to be located in Canada, Mexico, and European countries, suggesting the network's reach extended far beyond the United States. Detective Williams in Phoenix coordinated with Interpol to investigate international connections revealed in Stevens' communications. One frequent contact, using the username Guardian47, appeared to be located in British Columbia and had been sharing information about potential victims and concealment techniques for over 15 years. The investigation revealed that Stevens had received advice from network members about specific aspects of his crimes. Messages recovered from encrypted servers showed detailed discussions about soundproofing techniques, victim management, and disposal methods. Some communications included photographs and videos that network members had shared to document their activities. FBI raids conducted simultaneously across 12 states resulted in the arrest of 7 individuals connected to the network. Each arrest uncovered additional evidence of long-term criminal activity involving kidnapping, imprisonment, and murder. The scope of the investigation expanded to include potentially dozens of additional victims who had never been connected to organized criminal activity. Stevens had been considered a valuable member of the network due to his security industry access and technical knowledge. He had provided other members with information about mall layouts, security systems, and employee schedules that facilitated their targeting of victims in commercial locations. His contributions had made other network members more effective predators. The discovery of the Collectors Network shocked law enforcement agencies that had been treating similar cases as isolated incidents. "We were investigating individual predators without realizing they were part of a coordinated group sharing information and resources," explained FBI Director James Patterson during a press conference. "This network represents a new level of organized criminal activity that we're still working to fully understand." Stevens revealed that the network maintained detailed databases of potential victims, including photographs, work schedules, and personal information gathered through surveillance. Members would sometimes share information about specific individuals they were tracking, allowing multiple predators to contribute intelligence about the same target. The most disturbing aspect of the network was its longevity and sophistication. Members had developed elaborate protocols for avoiding detection, including methods for recognizing law enforcement surveillance, techniques for destroying evidence, and strategies for relocating when investigations became too intense. Stevens' move from Ohio to Arizona in 2000 had been coordinated through network advice and assistance. As investigators worked to dismantle the network, they realized that Stevens' confession had opened a door to solving potentially hundreds of missing person cases across multiple decades. The careful documentation maintained by network members provided investigators with unprecedented insight into organized, predatory criminal activity, but also revealed the terrifying scope of crimes that had been hidden in plain sight for decades. Justice for Jessica. On September 15, 2025, Michael Stevens was formally charged with 12 counts of first-degree murder across 4 states, with additional charges expected as the investigation into the Collectors Network continued. The arraignment took place in Columbus, Ohio, where Stevens faced charges related to Jessica Thompson's kidnapping and murder 25 years earlier. Stevens entered guilty pleas to all charges, accepting responsibility for his crimes in exchange for cooperation with ongoing investigations into the network. His detailed confessions had provided investigators with information leading to the recovery of 11 victims' remains and the rescue of Lisa Chen, who continued her recovery with extensive psychological support. Jessica's parents, Robert and Linda Thompson, attended every court proceeding. "We've waited 25 years for this moment," Linda told reporters outside the courthouse. "Nothing can bring Jessica back, but knowing that her killer will face justice and that his capture prevented other families from experiencing our loss gives us some measure of peace." The prosecution, led by District Attorney Sarah Mitchell, presented overwhelming evidence against Stevens. The case included his detailed confessions, physical evidence from multiple crime scenes, DNA matches linking him to victims across 4 states, and testimony from Lisa Chen describing her 4 months in captivity. Stevens' own journal entries provided prosecutors with a disturbing record of his methodical approach to selecting, capturing, and murdering his victims. During the sentencing phase, families of Stevens' victims were given opportunities to address the court. Elena Martinez, Rebecca's mother, spoke directly to Stevens. "You stole my daughter's future, her wedding, the children she would have had, the life she deserved to live. You took 25 years from our family, 25 years of wondering and hoping, and never knowing the truth." David Chen, Lisa's father, described the ongoing impact of his daughter's ordeal. "Lisa survived your torture, but she will carry these scars for the rest of her life. Every day she works to reclaim her sense of safety and trust in the world. Your actions didn't just harm her for the months she was your prisoner. They changed who she is forever." Dr. Patricia Williams, the forensic psychologist who had evaluated Stevens, testified about his psychological profile during the sentencing hearing. Stevens exhibits characteristics of an extremely organized predator who derived satisfaction not only from the crimes themselves, but from the control and planning involved in executing them. His participation in the collector's network demonstrates a level of criminal sophistication that made him particularly dangerous to society. The judge, Honorable Margaret Foster, imposed the maximum possible sentences: life in prison without possibility of parole for each murder charge, with sentences to be served consecutively rather than concurrently. The defendant has demonstrated through his actions over nearly 3 decades that he poses an ongoing threat to public safety, Judge Foster stated. The systematic nature of these crimes and the defendant's participation in organized criminal networks requires the most severe punishment available under law. Stevens' cooperation with investigators continued even after sentencing. FBI teams used his information to locate 3 additional burial sites, recovering remains that had been missing for over 20 years. His detailed knowledge of the collector's network led to additional arrests and the identification of victims who had never been connected to organized criminal activity. The investigation revealed that Stevens had been responsible for at least 15 murders, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in Ohio history. His ability to avoid detection for nearly 3 decades was attributed to his constant movement between states, his use of legitimate employment in security positions to gain access to victims and avoid suspicion, and his participation in the sophisticated criminal network that provided him with resources and advice. Lisa Chen, now in her 2nd year of recovery, established a foundation dedicated to supporting survivors of long-term captivity and helping families of missing persons navigate the criminal justice system. "Jessica Thompson's case being solved gave me hope during my darkest moments in that room," Lisa said during a foundation fundraising event. "I knew that someone, somewhere, was still looking for missing people like me." The demolition worker who discovered Jessica's hidden room, Carlos Ramirez, was recognized by the Ohio Attorney General's office for his role in breaking open the case. Carlos could have simply reported finding an old room and moved on with the demolition, Attorney General Robert Johnson said during the ceremony. Instead, he recognized the significance of what he had found and ensured that law enforcement was immediately notified. The Riverside Shopping Center, where Jessica had been held for 3 months in 1999 and 2000, was demolished in October 2025. The Thompson family held a memorial service at the site before demolition began, finally able to say goodbye to their daughter at the place where her ordeal had begun. A memorial garden was planned for the location, dedicated to Jessica and other victims of Stevens's crimes. Detective Sarah Chen, who had worked the Jessica Thompson case as a rookie officer in 1999, retired from the Columbus Police Department after Stevens's sentencing. "Jessica's case stayed with me throughout my entire career," Chen said during her retirement ceremony. Being able to bring her family the answers they deserved and prevent Stevens from harming anyone else made every difficult day worthwhile. Unraveling the network. Following Michael Stevens's sentencing in September 2025, FBI investigators intensified their efforts to dismantle the collector's network completely. Stevens' continued cooperation provided crucial intelligence about the network's structure, membership, and operational methods that had allowed the group to operate undetected for over 25 years. Agent Martinez, now leading a multi-agency task force dedicated to the investigation, coordinated simultaneous operations across North America. On October 3, 2025, Law enforcement agencies in 15 cities conducted coordinated raids based on information provided by Stevens and digital evidence recovered from encrypted servers. The operations resulted in 18 additional arrests and the seizure of thousands of pieces of evidence documenting decades of criminal activity. The arrested individuals included security guards, maintenance workers, retail managers, and other professionals whose legitimate employment had provided them with access to potential victims and the infrastructure necessary to construct concealment areas. The network had specifically recruited members with relevant professional backgrounds who could contribute specialized knowledge to the group's criminal activities. Guardian 47, the Canadian contact Stevens had frequently communicated with, was identified as Thomas Morrison, a 49-year-old mall security supervisor in Vancouver. Morrison had been responsible for at least 6 disappearances in British Columbia between 2005 and 2023. His arrest led to the recovery of 3 victims' remains from sites near Vancouver, and the rescue of 2 individuals who had been held captive for over a year. The investigation revealed that the collectors had maintained detailed victim databases that included thousands of potential targets across North America. Members would conduct surveillance on selected individuals for months before attempting abductions, gathering information about work schedules, living situations, and social connections that would affect the likelihood of successful crimes. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a criminal psychologist consulting with the FBI task force, analyzed the network's recruitment and operational methods. This group represented a new evolution in organized criminal activity, Dr. Walsh explained. They combined the methodical approach of traditional organized crime with the technological sophistication of modern cybercriminals and the psychological profiles of serial predators. The network had operated through multiple layers of security designed to protect member identities and prevent infiltration by law enforcement. Communications were routed through sophisticated encryption systems, and members used elaborate code words and procedures to discuss their activities without using language that might attract automated surveillance by law enforcement monitoring systems. Stevens revealed that the network had been planning to expand its operations internationally, with members in the United States and Canada working to establish connections with similar groups in Europe and Asia. Intercepted communications showed discussions about sharing victim information across international boundaries and coordinating activities to avoid detection by multiple national law enforcement agencies. The psychological impact on investigators working the case was significant. FBI counselors were assigned to support agents and detectives who were exposed daily to evidence of extreme criminal behavior spanning multiple decades. The scope and systematic nature of these crimes challenged our understanding of how organized predatory behavior could operate on this scale, Agent Martinez noted. Computer forensics teams recovered over 10 terabytes of data from network servers, including communications, photographs, videos, and detailed records of criminal activities. The evidence provided investigators with unprecedented insight into the planning and execution of organized predatory crimes, but also revealed hundreds of additional victims who had never been reported missing, or whose disappearances had been attributed to other causes. Stevens had been one of the network's most prolific contributors, but investigators discovered that other members had been equally active. Watchman 23, identified as former shopping center manager David Harrison from Pennsylvania, had been responsible for 11 confirmed murders over 15 years. Harrison's position had given him access to security systems and employee schedules at multiple retail locations. The international scope of the investigation required coordination between law enforcement agencies in 8 countries. Interpol established a specialized task force to track network members who had relocated internationally to avoid detection. Several arrests in European countries led to the discovery of additional criminal cells that had been operating independently while maintaining communication with the North American network. As the investigation progressed, families of victims began filing civil lawsuits against shopping center companies, security firms, and other businesses where network members had been employed. The lawsuits alleged that inadequate background checks and security procedures had enabled the criminal network to operate undetected for decades. The revelation of the collectors network prompted significant changes in security industry hiring practices and background investigation procedures. Professional security organizations implemented new standards for employee screening and ongoing monitoring, designed to prevent similar criminal infiltration in the future. Legacy and remembrance. By December 2025, the investigation into the collectors network had led to 43 arrests across North America and the recovery of remains from 67 victims spanning 3 decades. The case had become one of the largest serial crime investigations in law enforcement history, fundamentally changing how agencies approached missing person cases and organized criminal activity. Jessica Thompson's Memorial Garden was dedicated on December 14, 2025, exactly 26 years after her disappearance from Riverside Shopping Center. The ceremony brought together families of victims, law enforcement officers who had worked the case, and community members who had never forgotten Jessica's story. The garden featured a central memorial listing the names of all confirmed victims of the Collectors Network, surrounded by pathways and benches where visitors could reflect and remember. Linda Thompson spoke at the dedication ceremony, addressing the crowd of over 300 people who had gathered to honor her daughter's memory. Jessica would be 44 years old today, Linda said. She would probably have children of her own, a career, a life full of the experiences that were stolen from her. While we can never recover what was lost, we can ensure that her story continues to protect other young people from similar tragedies. The Jessica Thompson Foundation, established by her parents with support from other victim families, had raised over $2 million to fund missing person investigations, support survivor services, and implement safety programs at shopping centers and other public locations where young people might be vulnerable to predators. Lisa Chen, now fully recovered and completing her graduate studies at Arizona State University, served as the foundation's first executive director. My survival created an obligation to help prevent others from experiencing what Jessica and so many other victims endured, Lisa said during the foundation's first annual conference. We can't bring back the people we lost, but we can use their stories to save lives. The law enforcement response to the Collectors Network had resulted in significant changes to investigative procedures and interagency cooperation protocols. The FBI established a new division specifically focused on organized predatory crime, with resources dedicated to monitoring online communication networks and identifying patterns that might indicate coordinated criminal activity. Detective Sarah Chen, despite her retirement from active duty, continued working as a consultant for the new FBI division. Her experience with the Jessica Thompson case and understanding of how the network had operated made her invaluable in training other investigators to recognize similar patterns in unsolved cases. Michael Stevens died in federal prison in March 2026, apparently from natural causes related to his advanced diabetes and heart condition. His death came while he was still cooperating with investigators, providing information that helped solve additional cold cases connected to the network. Stevens's final confession, recorded weeks before his death, included details about 3 burial sites that had never been searched. The impact of the case extended beyond law enforcement and victim families. Shopping center industry organizations implemented new security standards and employee screening procedures designed to prevent similar criminal infiltration. The International Council of Shopping Centers established the Jessica Thompson Safety Initiative, requiring enhanced background investigations for all security personnel working in retail environments. Thomas Morrison, the Guardian 47 contact from Vancouver, was sentenced to life imprisonment in Canadian federal court. His cooperation with international investigators led to the identification of network connections in 6 additional countries and the recovery of remains from victims who had been missing for over a decade. Research conducted by criminologists studying the Collectors Network contributed to new understanding of how organized predatory groups form, operate, and can be detected by law enforcement. The case became a primary example in criminal justice training programs and academic studies of serial crime and organized criminal behavior. The memorial garden at the former Riverside Shopping Center site became a place of pilgrimage for families affected by similar crimes and law enforcement officers working missing person cases. The garden's design incorporated elements representing hope, remembrance, and the ongoing fight against predatory crime, with a central fountain featuring engraved quotations from victim families about the importance of never giving up the search for missing loved ones. Carlos Ramirez, the demolition worker whose discovery had triggered the entire investigation, was honored at the garden dedication ceremony. "I was just doing my job that day," Ramirez said, "but finding Jessica's room reminded me that every missing person represents a family that deserves answers. I'm grateful that my discovery could help bring justice for so many families." Sure. The complete investigation file for The Collectors Network filled over 50,000 pages and included evidence from crime scenes in 8 countries. The file became a primary resource for law enforcement agencies worldwide dealing with similar organized predatory crimes and missing person investigations. By the end of 2025, the network's criminal activities had been completely dismantled, with all known active members either arrested or under ongoing investigation. The coordinated international law enforcement response had prevented an unknown number of future victims from experiencing the fate that befell Jessica Thompson and the dozens of other young people whose lives were cut short by the network's methodical cruelty. Jessica Thompson's story, which began with a Christmas shopping trip in 1999 and remained hidden for 25 years behind a false wall, had ultimately led to one of the most significant victories against organized crime in law enforcement history. Her legacy lived on through the foundation, bearing her name, the memorial garden honoring all victims, and the enhanced safety measures that would protect future generations of young people from similar predators.